Welcome. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me at all? Is that any better?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Welcome. My name is Soleste Hilberg. I want to thank you very much for coming to my session today. I'm with UC Santa Cruz. I'm the Director of Teacher Education, which is our master's in our teaching credential program. We're extremely interested in encouraging community college students to apply to our program, whether or not you finish your bachelor's degree at Cal State, a private school, at a UC, it doesn't matter to us. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about our program today, as well as something that we call our Latinx Initiative for Future Teachers, and then how and why it came about. So welcome. I'm very thrilled that you all came today. Okay, the title of my talk today, or our session today, is Racial Affinity Group Networking through the UC Santa Cruz Latinx Initiative for Future Teachers, which we call our LIFT program. And I'll give you more information about that shortly. I'd like to start very briefly with a land acknowledgement, and I realize that we're not all coming from the same space today, but I do want to share the UC Santa Cruz land acknowledgement with you, which is the land on which we gather is the unceded territory of the Awaswas-speaking Yupi tribe. The Amamutsan tribal band, comprised of the descendants of indigenous people taken to missions Santa Cruz and San Juan Bautista during Spanish colonization of the Central Coast, is today working hard to restore traditional stewardship practices on these lands and to heal from historical trauma. So I very much appreciate you taking the time with me to acknowledge that we are currently all living and doing our work on lands that were stolen. So thank you so much. I think that's very important. So what I'm going to do today is first give you a little bit of information about what our program is, and then I want to give you the history. I call it an unfolding story because we are far from over yet, but it's really the unfolding story of how we came to create a racial affinity group for our Latinx students. And I say it's unfolding because we don't want to stop there. It's really this is really the beginning of some work that we hope to extend greatly. So a little bit about our program. We have a 12-month program. In 12 months, students earn both a master's degree as well as a teaching credential. And something that we've really strived for over the last few years is to increase the number of students of color in our program. And our primary motivation is that the students of California deserve to have teachers. It's imperative that they have teachers who look like them and who can represent them and who can stand up for them in our schools. And we feel that the best way to have significant change in schools is to ensure that we have a greater number of teachers of color for our students of color. There's a host of research that shows the positive benefits to students having just one teacher throughout their K-12 education who looks like them and who understands them and who truly knows them. And so our goal has been to, our long-standing goal is to try to attract students to our program so that eventually we hope that the demographics of our program are more closely aligned to the demographics of the students in the state of California, which are approximately 50% of Latinx descent. So we offer only a handful of credentials. We don't offer credentials. We're a small program, an intimate program. We have a cohort model. Students get to know each other intimately. And I think what's significant about our program is that students that graduate are significantly more prepared for the classroom because of the incredible amount of support that we provide. And I won't lie, it's a very challenging program. It's 12 months of very intensive work, but there are few programs in the state of California where you can earn both a master's degree and a teaching credential in just 12 months. And then people will come back to us and say, do you have any more teachers for us? Because all of your students come so much more prepared than other students and really ready to take ownership of their classrooms. So here's a list of the credentials that we offer. We have 2 different math credentials, foundational level, allowing you to teach up through allowing you to teach up through Algebra 2. And then we also have a full math credential allowing you to teach through calculus, physics, chemistry, biology, geosciences, English, multiple subjects, and social science. And our English, and we're also currently working to figure out how we can also support all of our students to be prepared, anyone who's interested, to be also prepared to teach ethnic studies. It's just some work that we're engaging in. Okay, that's just a little bit about our program. If anyone's ever interested, I'm very interested in meeting you. If you want to know more, you can come to our information night. And here is the link for that. And let me copy that and I'll paste it over into the chat. And then also feel free to contact me directly. I just love to talk to you and just sort of help you get some tips on what's needed to apply to our program, as well as how you can best make sure that your application is competitive to get into our program. We really aspire especially to support any undocumented students, and I know that it's been an issue where some students don't necessarily know whether or not they should share that they're undocumented, but in our program you really should, because we go out of our way to make sure that our undocumented students have funding, because they're not eligible, some of the grant funding and some of the scholarship funding that students who have U.S. citizenship are entitled to. So we go out of our way to make sure we have sufficient funding for any of our undocumented applicants. So that's just a little bit about our program, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a rationale as to why we started our program, our first racial affinity program, the Latinx Initiative for Future Teachers, or the LIFT program. So first of all, we know that many teachers leave the teaching profession. And so it's really of interest to us to figure out why teachers don't stay in the teaching profession. But on top of that, we know that teachers of color are leaving the profession at a rate of 24% higher than the white counterparts. And so to me, the question is, why is that happening? And there's a pretty good amount of literature and work that's been done to try to really uncover this. And really what at the root of it truly is, we're living in a society that has a history and it's founded upon racism and slavery. And we live in a culture that really centers the experience of white individuals. So our question is why, and also what can we do about it as a program? We're very committed to making sure that we increase and support the students of color who come to our program. So basically, I just want to give you a little smattering of some of the amazing research that's been happening in the field in recent decades. Really, it's not new. But basically, I want to share a study by another person who's going to be presenting tomorrow, I believe. I believe this is the keynote speaker tomorrow, for Khurshid. And but in any case, in a particular paper that I have cited at the bottom of this slide, the author did a 3-year ethnographic study looking at a grassroots racial affinity group. Some of the important findings from this particular research is that teachers of color who are committed to social justice are often in the teaching profession are often unsupported, and oftentimes they're pushed out. And so some of the challenges that were identified in this study is that people who are committed to social justice have real issues with mandated and state curriculum, because it doesn't tell the truth of the history and the roots of our society. So they have problems with the curriculum that they're supposed to be and expected to be teaching. They have to administer tests that are biased. There are biases in teacher evaluations about themselves. And that oftentimes they're working in schools and districts that have practices that perpetuate both the harms that we have in our society based on racism, and also that perpetuate our white supremacist society. So the conclusion of this particular study, or one of the things that the author asserts, is that there is a need for racial affinity spaces to support teachers of color to thrive. And I'll give you a short quote from this particular paper, but also to collectively heal, learn, laugh, and thrive in solidarity with one another. So I hope you go to that keynote tomorrow. I think it's going to be very exciting. I will certainly be there as well. Another study that I draw from in thinking about and learning about our racial, the importance and the need for racial affinity spaces is a study by Mawini, Baker Doyle, and Rosen from 2021. They did a qualitative study with 26 activist teachers. And some of their findings is that having an activist network is really essential to creating community and to mitigating harms and perpetuating the harms of our society toward people of color. But then also having activist networking, it supports teachers actually and really supports their resilience to be able to push back against racist practices, both towards the teachers, but also towards their students, so that our teachers can truly be social justice advocates for their students. And then another really important study that I want to mention, there's multiple studies, but it's the work by Rita Coley and Pizarro, and I'm sorry, I don't know the first name of Pizarro, but in any case, they've done extensive work, especially Rita Coley from UC Riverside, and she's actually written a book that we use for our mentor teachers of color that's really central to our work to support students, and it's called Teachers of Color, Resisting Racism and Reclaiming Education. Just a little plug for her book. It's really wonderful and helps me understand the great need for the work that we're doing. In any case, some of the findings from this particular study, and they were really telling the counter stories of teachers of color who are social justice oriented. But some of our findings is that teachers of color in the profession are basically on a high state of alert, a high state of anxiety, always waiting or anticipating the next racist encounter, either with their colleagues or their supervisors. And it wasn't mentioned, but also you're going to have these encounters with parents and communities as well. And that this high state of alertness leads to stresses that also breaks down the confidence and the motivation of teachers, which in turn is probably a factor in why teachers of color leave the profession. But they also found that when teachers are supported by having what they referred to as racial literacy skills, which is really the language to understand and analyze their own experiences, it really supports them to have, having this enhanced racial literacy really supports them to be able to cope and deal with it. And then she said that having a network, a racial affinity network, is really central to teachers of color being able to persist in a profession. And so their work's really important. I highly recommend these 3 articles. So I want to talk a little bit about our story at UC Santa Cruz and our teacher education program. So we started developing this initial awareness. We've always had a program that's been focused on equity, social justice, and anti-racism. Since its founding, that was really the focus of the program. However, I think over different time periods of the program, that was more or less a stronger feature of the program or a weaker feature of the program. And I've been with the program, this is my 6th year right now. And so I came into it having that understanding about the program and started looking at feedback from the students. And so my initial, hints that things were not quite right really came from our end of year feedback surveys. And some of the comments that really stood out to me is like, hey, we need more BIPOC students, or hey, you need to get more funding for students who are from marginalized groups, or, and then things that were big red flags for me. I'm sorry, I forgot to advance the screen. Things that were bigger red flags for me is like, this was really not a safe space for me. I felt like I was attacked for my ideas, or I didn't feel safe. I felt like my identity was disregarded. So these were big red flags for me. And then the next step for us was going beyond our end of year program surveys to doing a number of things. We started focus groups specifically with our students of color to find out about their experience. What was different? What would they recommend? What did they see as their needs? We also started doing very much more targeted recruiting and outreach, really drawing from our own student population, because we are a Hispanic serving institution, And so we don't necessarily feel the need to go much beyond ours, but we wanted to do a targeted recruitment and really find out why we aren't attracting more students of color into our program. One of the things that I found out just through informal conversations with our undergraduate students is I think the fact that we're a combined master's degree and teaching credential program is a little bit intimidating to some students, and they might see themselves becoming a teacher, but not necessarily a graduate student. Graduate students at UC Santa Cruz are oftentimes held on a pedestal. Many of them are in Ph.D. programs. And I remember talking to one student in the hall saying, "Hey, why don't you apply to our program?" And she kind of gasped and she goes, "I don't think I can get in." And I said, "Sure you can, why not?" And she goes, "Well, my GPA." And I said, "Well, if you have a reason that your GPA might be a little bit lower than what we require, let me know, talk about it, put it in your application, come see me." So we're really just trying to be much more welcoming to people and much more opening and much more understanding that some people might be approaching us, not coming at us with a competitive edge, but really more of a, needing a little bit of encouragement to apply to our program. So we also started putting on application workshops, which is not something that we'd done before. It was it's almost like we set the bar high and just wanted to see who could jump over the bar. And so now we put on very welcoming application workshops where we let students know every piece of the application. We let them know what to do in their application to make it more competitive as well. Something else that we wanted to do was to start affinity groups. And it really came out of the research, but it really came out of some of the feedback that we got from our end of year focus groups with students. And I'll tell you in just a moment some of the feedback that we got from that. Something else that we did is we started working in what we called cohesion and alignment cohort teams. And so we have cohorts of students. We have a math cohort. We have a social studies cohort. We have a multiple subjects or elementary school cohort. And they tend to be pretty small. They can range anywhere from 4 students in a given year, maybe up to 30. I think one time we had 40 students in our multiple subjects. We're a small program. People get to know each other really well. Students support one another, faculty, teacher supervisors, faculty mentors all support students as well. So it has a very different feel to it than some of these larger CSU programs that might have a few hundred students in it. It's very small. Everybody gets to know everybody. But we broke up into cohesion and alignment cohort teams. And basically, everybody who worked with a cohort got together and they had conversations and they worked out basically the themes and the concepts that are central to who we are as a program are equity, social justice, anti-racism, and anti-bias education. Our focus isn't just on supporting students to become teachers, really good teachers. We also want them to be equipped to be leaders who can speak out on behalf of their students and to really have the knowledge and the skills to be able to address injustices to their students as well as to themselves. So we broke up into these cohesion and alignment teams and worked together to really look at the entire curriculum over the 12 months of our program to figure out how and where and how strong these themes are of our program and also how we can build on them throughout the year. Some of the feedback that we heard from students is that, hey, you started off with a bang, really talking a lot about social justice and equity, and then we kind of lost it throughout the year as we were really learning more about the practical aspects of becoming a teacher. And so we talked, or if topics were brought up throughout the year, maybe they weren't done with the understanding that we had already talked about these things at great length and have a solid foundation from the summer. And what we really need is to build upon that across the year. So we took all this feedback and we really sort of revamped our program, making sure that these themes not only were introduced to students in their first summer, but they were built upon across the year. Something else that we did, because we're really trying to look at ourselves as a program, how is it that we're using the funding that we receive to provide scholarships to students? And how can we refocus that funding so that we're really attracting the students that we want in our program, meaning students of color and first-gen college students? And so one of the things that we did in the olden days, 5 years ago, we used to just score our our applications and then give out our funding to the highest scoring applications. Then we realized, hey, wait a minute here. All of our money is going to our sort of white middle class students. And then just sort of bringing our understanding, these students have had more advantage and more support in our society. So why don't we look at this differently, and how can we get money to the students who need it the most? So one of the things that we did, and I'm not sure if you know this, but if students, one of the scholarships available to low-income students as undergraduates is the Cal Grant program, which gives considerable amount of funding to undergraduate students from low-income households. So what we now ask is, we ask students when they come to our program, were you a recipient of the Cal Grant? And then if you were, number two, did you realize that you can get a 5th year of funding, but only if you go into a teaching credential program, and it's a substantial amount. And then what we do is, instead of giving out our money just to the highest scoring applications, we now supplement. We provide a supplemental scholarship to students who are coming to us with the 5th year Cal Grant. And that way we feel that we're having a better shot at identifying and giving our scholarship money to our first generation college students, as well as our students of color. That's the strategy that we now use. In addition, if students also identify as undocumented, we will also give them a substantially greater scholarship to attend our program, as well as I will sit down with every undocumented student we have and with the student and financial aid, and the three of us, the student, financial aid, and our program, make sure that the student has sufficient funding to attend our program. So this is just a flyer that we put out that I talked about targeted recruitment. We really send out targeted recruitment, really trying to attract our low-income students who are undergraduates who receive the Cal Grant, letting them know that there's a 5th year of funding and having them reach out to us. And so this is just one of our outreach flyers. So some of the feedback that we started getting from our students of color when we first started doing this, before we started revamping our program, some suggestions that students gave us in our focus groups is that we really need a space for networking and informal study for our students of color in the program. We need an affinity space so that we can share and problem solve issues when they come up. We need, in addition to a teacher supervisor, in addition to a faculty advisor, in addition to a cooperating or mentor teacher, we also need just a trusted mentor teacher of color, somebody that we can talk to about issues of being a student of color in a predominantly white institution, in a program that's predominantly white, and moving into a profession that is still predominantly white. Other things they asked for is help with writing. Something else that students talked about is, like, you should really forewarn students before they get in the program that being in this program and learning about social justice in education and learning about inequities in education, learning about the history of education in the United States, for many students, especially students of color, that this can be a process of self-discovery, and it can be reliving some of these experiences can actually be emotionally challenging. And so we had a number of students who let us know this, and this wasn't just during the pandemic as well. Some students recommended that we develop classroom norms on how to ensure safety for all students, because often students said they felt tokenized or expected to speak on behalf of their racial or ethnic group. Some students said they did not feel safe to say, hey, I need some help, which was a shock to us because we always prided ourselves, or thought that we could take pride in being a very supportive program. And then also people just really suggested, like, hey, the students in this program and the instructors really need to do some work and understand their own biases. And they need to have the language so that they can talk about these things with students. Yes, thank you. And I'm sure I don't have your first name, M. Perez, but thank you for commenting on tokenization. And yes, Santa Cruz is an absolutely stunning campus, and we are interested in community college students, and you should definitely contact me if you think you might want to move into teaching. But be aware that we're not just our program is really I would say, has two prongs. One is we want you to really know how to teach and be a good teacher. But number two, we want you to understand that the role that schools play and the role that you can play in being an advocate for your students and really making significant change in the world. We truly believe that we're part of a wave right now that's making a huge difference in changing schooling and the schooling experience for students much for the better. In any case, so this is some of the feedback that we got from our end of year focus group, some recommendations to us. And then we really felt that we needed a little bit of funding. And however, what I said is we're starting this program. I don't care if we have any funding, we're getting started. So I actually kind of got started with our program, the Latinx Initiative for Future Teachers. But we are a Hispanic serving institution. There was a much larger grant. I don't know how much it was, like $3 million or something. But they gave us a teeny little piece of that grant to start our program. But I did want to give a shout out to the GANAS project, which is called Graduating and Advancing New American Scholars. And there are a host of aspects to this program, to this particular grant that really support graduate students at graduate students of color at UC Santa Cruz. Okay, so this leads us to our Latinx Initiative for Future Teachers. Our goal is to increase the number of students of color within our master's and our teaching credential program. That said, that's not really the goal. The goal is to make sure that students have a positive experience and that they feel that they are the center of our program. They and the students that they serve are the reason that our program is in existence. So I mentioned this earlier that just having one same race teacher has countless benefits for students, and we know that. And we feel like if California is truly going to change our schools and the experience and address issues of inequity, address issues of injustices in the state of California, that we really need to ensure that we have more teachers of color. And to do that, we need to figure out how to support those teachers of color. So basically, we started our LIFT program. One of the barriers, we tried to identify the barriers, and one of the recommendations that came from one of those 3 articles that I mentioned earlier is that really, and I didn't mention this, but it's like you really need to make sure that students have the funding for the testing that they need. And we all know that going into a teaching credential program involves tests to get into the program and then more tests once you're in the program. Interestingly, the state of California, because we have a great shortage of teachers right now, has waived some of the much of the fees for many of the state mandated tests this year. It's been a little bit confusing about that, but in any case, our grant provided, we reimbursed students for the testing, typically the CBEST to meet the California Basic Skills requirement, and the CSET to meet the California subject matter requirement, but we reimbursed students for that. And then once students were accepted into our program, we had them apply to become a LIFT Scholar. We're now in our second cohort of LIFT Scholars. And whoops.
Carol Hilberg.
Sorry about that. Forgot to turn that off. And they also receive, in addition to most of our LIFT Scholars have the 5th-year Cal Grant, which is approximately $14,500. They also have a supplement to the Cal Grant, anywhere from $3,000 to $17,500 from our department scholarships. And in addition, we would give our LIFT Scholars an additional $2,000. And so for many LIFT Scholars, their entire program has been covered by scholarships. The cost of our program for 12 months, tuition and fees, is roughly $27,000, which is more than a CSU. However, you get both the master's degree and the teaching credential in just 12 months. And if you come to us as a LIFT Scholar, hopefully we can get you a package that's really going to cover for most of that. So in addition to the $2,000 scholarship, students get a teacher of color as a mentor. And this mentor is not somebody who's going to help you learn to be a teacher like your teacher supervisor. They're not your cooperating or mentor teacher in the classroom. This is somebody whose purpose is exclusively to help you navigate being a graduate student of color in a predominantly white institution, and to help you navigate moving into the teaching profession as a teacher of color, also in a predominantly white profession. And so that's a really important piece of this. We provide an additional day of orientation and networking to our LIFT scholars. We have a speaker series. Last year, we were very fortunate to bring, among other people, Rochelle Gutierrez, who talked about creative insubordination, strategies for teachers of color to really push back to ensure equity and social justice, both for themselves as well as their students. It was an amazing presentation. We offer these at no cost. And we also invite others besides that. And this year, we're actually bringing Rita Coley, who does a lot of work on how to support teachers of color. And then we also try to provide a space throughout the program that's really supportive for community, building community and networking. So those are the components of our program. And for us, what we really see is what we really want to do is continue to get feedback, not just from our students of color, but also specifically from our LIFT scholars to find out what their experience is and how we made any progress in trying to address and meet the needs of students. And so what I'd like to do now is move into a little bit more of an interactive aspect of the presentation today. Thank you, Kathleen. I don't see the link. Kathleen wanted everyone to know to go ahead and fill out I can paste it in there. I can paste in the link. I have it ready to go. But in case, I'll get to that in a minute. But I want to mention an article by Ut, and it's called Common Racial Missteps by Well-Meaning White Teachers. And this is an activity that we do with our LIFT scholars at our orientation. But we really want to help give our students, I know that one of the authors in the studies that I mentioned previously talked about giving people, supporting students to advance their own racial literacy and giving them the language to talk about and to analyze their own experiences as a student of color. And so I'm going to talk about some of these common racial missteps by well-meaning white teachers that Ut talks about in this article. But I also want you to be thinking about, because I'm going to give you a chance to either say something about it in the chat or to please feel free to turn your mic off and just go ahead and speak out. But, basically two questions. One is, do you have any prior knowledge or experience about this particular misstep in your own experience in K-12 education? And then also, should this happen to you? Should you see this happen to one of your students? Or should you see it happen to a peer? What are some thoughts about ways that you might respond to address this, what Ut calls a common racial misstep? So we're going to move into now a little bit of an activity phase of this presentation. So one of the first things that Ut talks about is what he calls essentializing. But basically, it's when you say that there's a particular characteristic of a group of people within a culture or a particular race, that they have an essential quality. For instance, you might say, oh, all Latinx students are blah, blah, or oh, all white students are blah, blah. So you're actually essentializing. You're saying that there's some quality that's essential or central or common across all members of a group, which we know is completely inaccurate, but it's just a form of our own bias and our own racism. And so I'd like to open it up and just see if this rings a bell with anybody. And I would welcome anyone to write something over in the chat about any experience that you may have had where you felt that either you or someone you know has been essentialized. Maybe you've witnessed it. Or if you can give me an example, I would really appreciate that of essentializing in your own experience. Or you feel free. I would love it if people would want to raise their hands and share something from your own experience. Anyone? Oh, I'm sorry. And I don't know your name is M. Perez. Thank you. And yes, please feel free. Thank you for putting your hand up too.
You're welcome. It's Monica. Can you hear me?
Is it Monica?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Can you guys hear me? Perfect. I actually would like to share, as a member of the Mexican culture, I didn't grow up speaking Spanish in my house. We spoke only in English. So as I went through school, I took high school Spanish like everybody else. And as I got older, I became really frustrated that people would see me and automatically speak to me in Spanish. No, just assuming that I knew Spanish or that I was fluent in Spanish. I'm not fluent in Spanish. My Spanish is not that great at all. But what I have found out now that it's the kind of like in my face all the time as a high school teacher is when I'm looking at my students and I automatically, or when I'm looking at their parents, even more so, I automatically switch over to speaking to them in Spanish simply because they're Mexican. And it's kind of been like a little slap in the face for me because it was like, well, shoot, wait a minute. You didn't like it when people were doing it to you. You need to be mindful of the fact that others may not like it when I'm doing it to them.
Yeah, I really want to thank you for sharing that, Monica, because I can't tell you, for me, it's like every time I think I'm like, I'm a little bit more aware, I'm a little bit better about my biases, somebody will point out to me like, I did it again, I stepped in it again. So I think we do have to be humble about where we're at. And I think that we need to be very gracious with ourselves because, we all, you, me, we all live in this society where we have been inundated with messages from society that do influence us in very subtle ways. So thank you so much for sharing. That's a perfect example of an essentializing experience that you had. And I just love that you shared how it also impacts your own work today. So thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, good. So I'm going to move on to the next one, and hopefully that we'll see if we, so the next one, somebody had mentioned it earlier, it's called tokenizing. And so basically it's when you say that this person is a member of this particular group, whether that be a racial or an ethnic group, and that they can then represent and speak for everybody in that group. And so that's called sort of using that individual as a token. And so I'm wondering if anyone has had that experience, and I can see that folks are starting to sign off here, but that's okay. And let me just go through these really quick. Was somebody about to say something? Yes,
I can go really quick. I think I can kind of relate to it, but in a different way. For me, I'm from Brazil. And whenever I mention that I'm from Brazil, everyone's like, what? You're from Brazil? You don't look like you're from Brazil. So I think it's kind of the opposite. People don't use me as an example because for some reason they don't think that I look like a Brazilian. But yeah, so I think it's kind of the opposite. I'm not using it as a token, but I'm excluded from the token.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
I don't look like them.
Yeah, it's like you're not fitting people's own biased misperceptions. Awesome. And yeah, and then Monica just put in there that you become overlooked. Awesome.
Correct.
Thank you both. I appreciate that. Okay, I'm gonna go through these kind of quickly, but another thing that is very considered highly disrespectful is that people and it happened within our program. Some people don't understand that pronouncing someone's name correctly is really a form of respect. And so mispronunciation of names, and some people just sort of, I think for many people, they just get used to people or their teachers mispronouncing their names instead of, expecting that people will pronounce their names correctly as they should be. And then also using racially coded language. And just some examples that are provided are using the word ghetto or tiger moms, or talking about if only the parents really cared about their kids' education. Some of these biases really show up in racially coded language. It's very harmful, causes a lot of harms to students. And I find this one especially challenging because it seems like every time I think I'm really doing a good job watching my pronouns and watching my biases and watching my language, I'll find out, oh my gosh, I had no idea that issue. And I'll just give you an example of this. I was reading some emails in a news group, and it was an activist news group, and someone said something like, yes, we need to stand up and fight. And then somebody said something, the response was, hey, let's not use ableist language. And it just really shocked me. It's like ableist. And then I just had to think about it for a long time. But using something as simple as stand up to fight, not everybody can stand up. We have many people who are wheelchair bound or have disabilities that prevent them from standing up. And I thought, wow, I have a lot to learn. This is really challenging. And then also a lot of people, thanks, Paula. I never thought about it either. It's like I learn something new every day, but I feel like people are calling me out on a regular basis, but I do appreciate it. I went to a wonderful conference not about a year and a half ago, and it was done here locally. And maybe it was the Abolitionist Teacher Network. I'm not really sure, but whoever the main presenter was, or the facilitator, she said, "Oh my gosh, people are calling me out. I've had 3 call outs in the last hour. I love it." And so I feel like I just have to be thankful when people call me out and correct me and let me know that I'm using coded language unintentionally. And I do appreciate the opportunity to grow. So another thing that is talked about in this particular article is being race neutral rather than culturally responsive. And for decades, a lot of teachers were taught just ignore race in the classroom, treat all children the same. We now know better. You can't treat all children the same. Some children are coming to you as being advantaged by our society, our white supremacist society, and other children in your classroom have been traumatized, that they don't see themselves in the curriculum. They don't feel comfortable in your classroom. They feel corrected. They feel out of place. And so we really can't. We need to be aware that children are coming to the classroom with very different backgrounds, and we need to figure out ways that we can be responsive and that we can be supportive of all students. So that's it for me. I'm going to turn off this, and I just want to say thank you so much for coming to my session today. And if you have any questions for me, I encourage you to please reach out to me. I'm going to put my email address over in the chat again, but if anyone wants to talk to me about any of these topics, or if you would like a copy of my presentation, or if we have any community college students who think at some point you might want to come to UC Santa Cruz. Okay, I love the questions. Paula, if you want to be in LIFT, what you need to do is apply to our program, get accepted. Every student that's accepted gets an invitation for me to apply. And honestly, every year, this is only our 2nd year, but we scrounge up the money to let everybody into our program. The grant only funds 12 people, but if I have more than 12 people apply, we use some other funds to make sure that anybody who wants to participate gets to be in our program. So the hard part's really getting into our master's program, but it's not that hard. Call me and I will give you tips. And so I think you said that I have to go back to my slide. Did you want the copy of the article? Let me go find that. It's an absolutely wonderful article, and I will find it very quickly here to my notes. Here it is. It's a great piece. I'm pretty sure you can actually, oh yeah. Here it is. There's actually the link and you can download it on the web. There you go. There's the link. So thank you so very much for coming to my session today and listening to how our program is really trying to take issues of equity and anti-racism seriously, and really trying to find ways that we can be a part of this huge movement in the state of California to do a better job serving all of the students of California, and trying to ensure that schools become places of equity and justice and no longer are places of harm for our students. Thank you very, very much. And just as a reminder, I would like to, once again, I'm going to copy and paste the link that somebody put, Kathleen White, she must be part of the session, but here is a copy of the evaluation. I'm pretty sure it's generic. I think the evaluation is for the whole conference. It might be just for this one session, but I'm not really sure. So thank you so much for coming, and feel free to contact me. Thank you, Malika. Thank you, Melissa. And Lisbeth, thank you so much for coming today. Lisbeth, Melissa, Malika, and Paula. See you. Have a great day. Thank you, Lisbeth. Appreciate that. I hope you reach out. Yes, thank you, Melissa. Thank you for coming. Have a great day.